The proceedings began with the traditional call to order. The court officer, with a voice that commanded respect, announced the arrival of Judge Judy. "All rise," he stated, and the small assembly in the gallery stood as the judge took her seat at the high bench. Case number 3011, Lucero versus Block. "Thank you," the judge said, her sharp eyes immediately scanning the documents before her. "You are welcome," the officer replied. Judge Judy looked toward the plaintiff, Wanda Lucero. She was a woman who carried herself with the quiet strength of someone used to advocating for others. "Ms. Lucero, this is your sister," the judge noted, gesturing toward the woman beside Wanda. "Yes," Wanda replied. "And she has a daughter," the judge continued. "Yes, her daughter is challenged." "Yes." The story began to unfold like a somber tapestry. Wanda's sister and her daughter had been living together until the sister reached a point in her life where she required the specialized care of a senior community. This decision, made in March of 2022, left her 38-year-old daughter in a precarious position. Wanda had stepped in more actively over the past year to manage the care of both her sister and her niece. The search for a safe haven for her niece led them to the defendant, Lawrence Block, who ran a boarding house in San Bernardino, California. The referral had come from a social worker at a hospital. Wanda's niece had suffered a week of homelessness and a subsequent infection that required hospitalization. It was during the discharge process that the hospital staff suggested Mr. Block's facility. On the surface, it seemed like a solution to a desperate problem. But beneath the surface, the foundations of the arrangement were already starting to crack. Chapter 2, The Rooming House Reality. Judge Judy turned her attention to Lawrence Block. "Mr. Block, on what date did the plaintiff's niece come to live in your group home?" "I am not sure on the date," Lawrence admitted, looking slightly uneasy. "March 14th of 2022, the judge provided the answer from her files. The judge asked Lawrence to describe the house. It was a 5-bedroom, 2-bath residence covering 2,000 square feet. Lawrence explained that he typically housed 8 to 10 residents, all of whom were psychologically disabled. He was licensed by the city of San Bernardino, but only as a room and board facility, just a room for rent. The judge noted with a hint of skepticism. In this house, the rules were strict. The garage was kept locked to secure food and supplies, preventing residents from pillaging the pantry before meals could be prepared. A house manager lived on site 24 hours a day, serving both as a tenant and an overseer. Wanda's niece shared a room with this manager toward the end of her stay, a detail that would later prove to be the spark for the entire conflict. Chapter 3, The Straw That Broke the Camel's Back. Wanda Lucero had always tried to keep close tabs on her niece. She visited often and coordinated medical care. On November 30th, she arrived at the house to pick up her niece for a doctor's appointment. While they were still in the bedroom, an unsettling scene unfolded. Wanda watched as her niece opened her purse and tossed some undergarments to the house manager. Once they were safely in the car, Wanda asked her niece about the items. "Liz, what are you doing with her undergarments in your bag?" Her niece replied that they had been to Walmart and the manager had asked her to put them in there. "You stole them," Wanda realized with a heavy heart. The manager had used a vulnerable woman to shoplift. That was a straw, Wanda testified, her voice firm. There had been other issues, but this was the final straw. She decided then and there that her niece would not spend another night in that house. Around 3 o'clock that afternoon, she returned to remove her niece's belongings. Chapter 4, The Driveway Deadlock. Wanda arrived at the house with heavy-duty trash bags and began the frantic process of packing. She had not notified Lawrence Block or the management of her immediate departure. She was acting on a protective impulse, a need to remove her niece from what she perceived to be a corrupt environment. While Wanda was inside, her son arrived to assist. He parked in the driveway to help load the bags. This was when the situation escalated from a family emergency to a neighborhood confrontation. Lawrence Block's son, who lived at the house, felt that Wanda was being aggressive. In response, Wanda used her utility vehicle to block him into the driveway. She was determined to get one last item from the garage, a clothes hamper that she believed belonged to her niece. Lawrence received a frantic call from his son while he was at a community hospital interviewing a potential new client. Some lady is yelling at me about getting into the garage. And then she parked behind me and won't let me leave, his son told him. Lawrence was fumed. The Papa Bear instinct, as he later called it, took over. He rushed back to the house, a journey that took about 45 minutes. Chapter 5. The Clash of Protective Spirits. When Lawrence arrived at the house, the scene was chaotic. Wanda's dark utility vehicle was parked at the end of the driveway, preventing his son's car from exiting. Lawrence was irate. He saw his son being held hostage in his own driveway. Wanda, on the other hand, was desperate for the hamper and felt that the management was being deliberately obstructive. Lawrence approached Wanda's car. He was out of control, cussing and calling her names. He admitted to the court that he was not being rational. In his anger, he reached out and grabbed the handle of Wanda's driver's side door. He opened it and confronted her while she sat in the driver's seat. According to Wanda, he grabbed her car door remote, slammed the door, and hit her windshield. He then went to the back door, where she alleged he scratched the paint. Lawrence then proceeded to grab the bags of her niece's belongings from the car and threw them out into the street. To finish the display of aggression, Lawrence drove his own vehicle head on toward Wanda's car, as if he were going to strike her, only swerving away at the last second after his son managed to drive over the curb to escape. Chapter 6. The Verdict of Accountability. Judge Judy watched the video evidence provided by Lawrence's son. She saw the tension, the blocking of the driveway, and the clear signs and argument that had gone too far. While she agreed that Wanda had no legal right to block the son in the driveway, she was far more concerned with Lawrence's physical aggression. You have no right to touch her car, scare her physically, or touch her property, the judge lectured Lawrence. She noted that while he was in the business of caring for a vulnerable population, his behavior that day showed a lack of the temperament required for such work. The judge reviewed the damages. Wanda had a cracked windshield and a scratch on the door. Her insurance had covered the majority of the repair, but she was out of pocket for her $250 deductible. Additionally, Lawrence had taken her garage door opener during the scuffle, which cost $134.95 to replace. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $385. Judge Judy declared. The court was adjourned. Chapter 7. Reflections on a Vulnerable System. In the aftermath of the trial, both parties reflected on the incident. Lawrence regretted his loss of temper, though he still felt he was defending his son. Wanda felt a sense of relief that her niece was finally safe and away from the boarding house. The case highlighted a deeper, more systemic issue that troubled the court. It was a revelation that in many places, almost anyone can open a rooming house for people with psychological challenges without rigorous government oversight. As the legal analyst noted afterward, you need a license to give a pedicure, yet a safe haven for the vulnerable can be operated with little more than a room for rent permit. The burden of vetting these facilities often falls on the families, who are already overwhelmed with the care of their loved ones. It is a monumental task for a vulnerable population. As Wanda Lucero had discovered, protecting those who cannot protect themselves requires constant vigilance, sometimes leading to confrontations that end in a courtroom, seeking a small measure of justice in a world that often forgets the most fragile among us.